Welcome back to Taliesin's map. This is a response to those who argue that Lu is equal to Odin, and is specifically a response to the YouTuber Fortress of Lu. From my own past experience, this is a mistake that can become a real obstacle to understanding the Celtic pantheon from a comparative mythology lens. The comparisons to motifs such as an association with binding or owning a victorious spear, which Fortress of Lu makes, provide too shaky a foundation to establish the needed confidence. To create the clarity we need, we would have to be able to name at least one narrative myth that Lu and Odin share. But that, unfortunately, doesn't exist. We should all confront this elephant in the room, a disconcerting hole where a shared mythos between Lu and Odin should be. As for Fionn and Odin, we have a remarkable set of shared narrative myths. Who is the lord of the Gaelic Mannerbund, the Fianna warband, who receives knowledge from a magic well? Fionn, aka Fionn. Who is the leader of the so-called Wild Hunt, as Odin also is? Gwyn, Welsh linguistic cognate of Finn. Who loses an eye and transforms into a fish, both things Odin also does? Fintan. Now, who fasts under a magical tree to gain the power of prophecy next to waters that turn all things white after drinking from a magical cup, all of which Odin famously does? Finn. Who is considered the storehouse of all knowledge? Fintan. Who, in a coded myth, divides sky from earth along with his two brothers, as Odin divides Ymir's body into sky and earth? Eivor Finn. Who steals back the wondrous liquid within the cow from the giant in the tower and sleeps with his daughter while there, exactly like Odin does? Finn MacKinley. Who has two famous hunting dogs named Raven and Survivor? Finn. Who wields the spear of Fiacha, that is, the spear of Raven? Finn. Whose death is signaled by a rampaging beast that his grandson then kills by placing his knee on its lower jaw and stretching its upper jaw wide, very much echoing the story of the deaths of Odin and Fenrir. Finn. Finn, none of these myths belong to Lu, these Odinic myths. Lu does not lose an eye or turn into a fish or gain wisdom from a well or lead the wild hunt or lead the Fianna warband. In fact, Lugith mac Con's Fianna leader is Fionn mac Cool. That is, the higher form of Lu, who is called Lugith, requires a separate Mannerbund god to lead him. He doesn't lead the Mannerbund himself, as Odin would. And this Mannerbund leader is, of course, none other than Fionn, aka Finn. Amazingly, almost all of Odin's myths are reflected in the myths of Finn/Fintan, none in Lu. This is why all attempts to find an actual full myth that is paralleled between Odin and Lu are extremely strained and awkward. Just try to name a full mythic story with its details that Odin shares with Lu/Lugith, something that isn't just a shared association, a generality. When we focus on the Fionn mythos, Celtic myth has parallels for essentially all of the famous events of the Odin mythos. The way the Odinic type mythos works in Celtic myth is this. The primary Gaelic Odin is the god Fionn, also known as Eivor Finn in the Book of Invasions, whose Welsh linguistic and mythic cognate is Gwyn or Gwion. The F and the G simply are interchanged between Gaelic and Welsh language. No other god in Celtic myth has anywhere close to the enormous set of precise parallels to Odin that we see circling Fionn/Gwyn. In the Gaelic case, Fionn leader of the Fianna, which is the Gaelic Mannerbund, is juxtaposed to a rival/friend Fianna leader named Goll, Goll, meaning the one-eyed. Based on a consistent pattern of mythic parallels, we can see that the two rival/friend Fianna leaders, Fionn and Goll, are two sides of one and the same deity, the one-eyed Mannerbund god, the Odinic god. Fionn further has a primordial double named Fintan from the same name root, who continues the same Fionn/Odin type mythos and who is also esoterically identified with the one-eyed salmon of knowledge, Goll Essa Ruath. Once again, we see Finn versus Goll names as two epithets of the same being. Note, this is not the Rudra versus Shiva duality, but instead Fionn is Rudra Shiva himself, while Goll is more like Mahakala Bhairava, his more terrifying aspect. So they both are Rudra Shiva in total. The seer and peace-weaving brother of Averfin, named Averyin, Amergin, is the Shiva parallel, because the three brothers, Averfin, Averyin, and Erevan, are three aspects of one and the same god, exactly as it is with Odin and his two brothers, Heinir and Lother, on the primordial scene, and exactly as it is with Rudra, Shiva, and Agni in the parallel myth. Then, based on clear parallels to Odin and to Averfin, which I have shown in my creation myth videos and articles, we can see that the Welsh Efnisien, the hostile one who is juxtaposed to his peacemaking brother Nisien, is but another alternate name of Gwyn, the Welsh Odinic god. If we then take this grouping of Mannerbund gods, centering around the name Fionn/Gwyn and one-eyedness, we can see that parallels to essentially the entire Odin mythos are preserved in Celtic myth, and more beyond what we have of Odin as well. Please read for yourself in each of these tales to find the Celtic versions of these Odin-type myths, and remember that some details, of course, change. Number 1. Just as Odin loses an eye by plucking it out himself, Fintan loses an eye in the Hawk of Achill. The hawk that takes his eye is born and dies on the same days as Fintan does, and so this implies that it could be simply another aspect of Fintan himself, thus taking out his own eye in a sense, as Odin does in a more straightforward, less esoteric manner. Also see the one-eyed Goll and the one-eyed salmon of knowledge that Fintan gets identified with, Goll Essa Ruath. These are all aspects of one deity, with Goll emphasizing the one-eyed side of the deity. Number 2. As Odin gains wisdom at Mimir's well, so Finn gains wisdom at a well in the boyhood deeds of Fionn. Number 3. As Odin hangs and fasts on the windy tree, acquiring the runes, above the well of Erd that turns all things white, after drinking from a magical cup, so also Fionn fasts under a magical tree to gain the power of prophecy next to the lake of the Cailleach that turns all things white after drinking from a magical cup in the Hunt of Slieve Quillen, Slevecuillinn. Unlike when Welsh Lle is killed and takes eagle form and rests in the otherworldly tree before reviving, the narrative details of Fionn's myth actually match Odin's. The precise details of the myth matter. The act of Odin and Fionn is a self-imposed ascetic act involving fasting, not an attack from someone else that causes the god to die or partially die and take bird form and go to the otherworld and then be revived by someone else. Welsh Lle's death is far more similar to the death of Balder in its actual details, and Dumasil's explanation of the connection between Balder and Tyr, both being correlated to the Mitra type, explains why this is the case. As Arno Preiner has pointed out, the salmon of knowledge, with which the one-eyed salmon Fintan is identified, also does something very reminiscent of Odin's myth, because the salmon of knowledge acquires its knowledge by eating 9 hazelnuts that have fallen from 9 trees into the well of wisdom called Segush. This myth, with its repetition of the number 9, could mirror either Odin gaining the knowledge of the runes after hanging 9 nights upon the sacred tree, or his gaining of wisdom from the well once again. The 9 hazelnuts or trees themselves could stand in the place of the 9 nights in the Norse version. Either way, it is yet another myth with an Odinic theme tied to a Fionn-type divinity. Number 4. As Odin's death is brought about by the rampaging beast Fenrir, who is killed when Odin's son puts his foot on the lower jaw of the wolf and stretches his upper jaw wide with his hands, so Fionn's impending death is instead signaled by the rampaging beast, the boar of 4 Mile, who is killed when Fionn's grandson, who happens to bear the name of another son of Fionn, places his knee on the lower jaw of the boar and stretches his upper jaw wide with his hands in the chase of Sheath na Man Finn and the death of Finn. Number 5. Odin's parentage from Bor, son of Buri, also matches the parentage of Averfinn, son of Galuf, son of Bila, in the Milesians, from the Book of Invasions. When these figures are understood, Buri and Bila, the grandfathers, are both the Prajapati-type god, while Bor and Galuf are the Manu/Kama type, and this genealogy is identical in Vedic, Gaelic, and Norse branches as a result, with Prajapati being the grandfather, of course, of Odin, with the intermediary step being Manu, aka Kama. See my videos on the Indo-European Absolute and the creation myth for more information. Number 6. Odin and his 2 brothers divide earth and sky by killing Ymir and dividing him into earth and sky. Averfinn and his 2 brothers killed the 3 husbands of the triple Mother Earth, Eru, Fodla, and Banva, in the Milesians from the Book of Invasions. This is the violent ending of the marriage of the triple Earth with her triple husband Sky, and thus it is the division of earth and sky once again. This is the parallel of the division of Ymir. Number 7. Odin steals back the stolen mead from a giant in a mountain and sleeps with his daughter, who helps him steal the mead while he's there, while Finn MacKinley steals back the stolen cow with the wondrous milk from a giant in a tower and sleeps with his daughter, who helps him steal the cow in Balor on Tory Island. Of course, the wondrous liquid, or the soma of Vedic myth, is commonly identified with or compared with milk. Number 8. Odin leads the wolf-themed Mannerbund, the Ulfhednar or Einherjar, while Fionn leads the Fianna, who often take names signifying dog or wolf. As Joseph Nage's book, Wisdom of the Outlaw, has it, quote, "Just as Fenidi, that is, members of the Fianna, resemble supernatural beings more than they do the members of human society, so too they sometimes appear closer in nature to animals than to humans. Finn's favorite hunting dogs are, as we shall see, his own metamorphosed nephews, or nephew and niece. A Fenid, mentioned in the Middle Irish tripartite life of St. Patrick, is named Phelan, little wolf. This is also the name of one of Finn's sons and of a son of Cailcha, Finn's trusty companion, and one of the Fenian survivors in the colloquy. One of the most famous of the Fenian heroes, who is constantly making trouble for his fellow Fenidi, yet who in some ways is a multiform of the figure of Finn himself, is called Conan Macmorna, which means little dog. The seemingly canine nature of Fenidi, especially Fenian ones, is an expression of their martial identity. While it is important to place the seeming bestiality of the Fenid in the context of Celtic heroic metaphor and Indo-European Mannerbund symbolism, we should not underestimate the extent to which the Fenian heroes are presented in narrative as genuinely part animal." Unquote. Number 9. Odin leads the wild hunt, while Gwyn, the Welsh Fionn, leads the wild hunt. Like the Vedic Rudras, divinities of storm and rain who are Rudra's own troop. Gwyn and his host are closely connected to clouds in this wild hunt motif. In a poem of the medieval poet Dafydd ap Gwilym, clouds are, quote, the family of Gwyn, Tylwyth Gwiri, unquote, and are, quote, the moor of the headland, unquote, of Gwyn and his family. The wild hunt is alternately called in Welsh Awn I Wybr, quote, the hounds of the clouds, unquote, while Gwyn's dog is said to wander, quote, upon Cloud Mountain, unquote, yielding an image of the wild hunt racing through the upper air. He is followed by the Echicon, the bogies, sprites, elves, phantoms, or demons, and is even said to be one of the lords of Annwn, the otherworld, where the souls of the dead are taken during his hunt. See Gwaith Dafydd ap Gwilym, GDG, edited by Thomas Perry, 127.29-30, 150, 52, 26.40, 68.32, and cf. line 40 and 127.32. Number 10. Odin shamanically turns into a fish in Ynglinga Saga, while Fintan turns into a fish in the Caesarian section of the Book of Invasions. See also the Salmon of Knowledge, Gol Essa Ruath, and the Welsh Gwion, a form of Gwyn, who also turns into a fish in Hanes Taliesin. Number 11. Odin kills the servant who sleeps with Frigg in Gesta Danorum, while Fionn hunts down the servant who almost sleeps with his woman in Fionn and the Man in the Tree, and Gwyn defeats his attendant Gwythyr, who carries off his consort in Collach and Olwen. See my Cernunnos video to learn how these are variants of the same myth. Number 12. Odin fathers Vidar, killer of Fenrir, as Fionn is grandfather of Oscar, killer of the Boar of 4 Mile, who dies in almost identical fashion to Fenrir in The Chase of Sheath na Man Finn and the Death of Finn. Number 13. Odin fathers Vali, avenger of the death of Balder, while Avrian, an aspect of Fionn as earlier described, fathers Conall Cernach, avenger of the death of Fergus. Fergus's death is identical to that of Balder, as Ailil tricks the blind Lugith Dalacus into throwing a spear at Fergus, just as Loki tricks the blind Hother into throwing a shaft of mistletoe at Balder. So Conall Cernach is Vali, and Conall's father Avrian has been shown to be an aspect of Fionn in my creation myth videos. The linchpin of everything is, as mentioned dozens of times, Odin is equivalent to Rudra in his core mythos, and it is Fionn, or Finn, the hunter and seer and Mannerbund leader, who is the parallel of the hunter and seer and Mannerbund leader Rudra. There is no serious question about Fionn's status as a god either, even though in his tales he is presented as human-like. Yet his acts are clearly godlike and parallel the god myths of other branches in detail, and he lives and interacts among the gods without a pause, and is of the family of confirmed gods. As John Carey summarizes, quote, some Middle Irish sources suggest that the Fianna were themselves supernatural inhabitants of the wilderness. In the Dinshenahas poem on Shlai Dala, they are paired with the Fomorians, TLS 10.280.49, and in Kogath Gaithel Re Galav, paired with the troops of the Sidhe, or the burial mounds, unquote. See John Carey, Nodens in Britain and Ireland, page 20. The proposed deity name underlying Fionn and Gwyn is reconstructed as Proto-Celtic Windos. See John Carey's Nodens, Lugus, and Windos in Études luxembourgeoises d'histoire et de sciences des religions 1, page 99 through 126. When Nuada is understood as Varunian, as we have suggested, and the aforementioned Celtic figures as Rudraic, we are also able to shed some light on the great mystery of how the Norse god Odin can seem to combine the Rudraic divinity with the Varunian role in himself. The fact that Varunian Nuada is grandfather of Fionn, and his cognate Neith is father of Gwyn, may hint at a deeper connection between the two deity types. the Varunian and the Rudraic, the Nuada type and the Fionn type. John Carey submits that, quote, insofar as the meagerness of the Welsh evidence allows us to judge, therefore, Nuada/Llydd, aka Neath, and Finn/Gwyn represent different aspects of Nodons. The overlapping attributes of Nuada and Finn and the identification of Nodons with Mars suggest that the divine ancestor, Nodons, in fact comprises all of these functions and that his offspring reflect facets of his character, unquote. From Carey, page 21 through 22. He then expands upon this theory that the British Nodons may combine in himself both the Neath and the Gwyn deities in one figure, though this theory is difficult to prove due to the stated overlap. That is, that Nodons combines the Varunian and the Rudraic, similarly to what we see with Odin, concluding, quote, Nodons thus appears as a god of multifaceted but consistent character, a shining royal warrior presiding over the chaotic in nature, society, and the otherworld, water, war, the devils of Anuan. It is of further interest that such a figure should appear as a dynastic ancestor and the eventual victim of the forces which he dominated, unquote. From Carey, page 22. Note how similar all of this is to Odin. However, we must add to all of this, Fintan is the ancestor of Nuada himself, the god, as we see in the cause of the Battle of Cnuha. Fintan is unquestionably a god, then, if this genealogy is minded. To imagine that Finn is simply a legendary hero and not a god would be to completely misunderstand how Celtic mythic legend functions, as it uses euhemerism as only a tool for conveying divine myths. Thus, Fintan, as the divine ancestor, subsumes the god Nuada, who subsumes and gives rise to Fionn Macul, and these intertwining deity types are simply treated as one in the case of Odin, and in this way we can understand why Odin is primarily Rudra Varuna in Vedic terms, with a couple of additional aspects besides. The Rudra and Varuna types were always intertwined, it seems, if this Celtic evidence is taken seriously. Fortress of Lu's attempts to find even a single narrative myth shared between Odin and Lu results only in awkwardness and complete confusion that even he can't disentangle logically. The main straw that he tries to grasp is the equating of Lu killing Balor with Odin killing Ymir, and the cow Glasgavnin with the cow Althumbla, cow, giant, and giant killer. These superficial roles are all that the suggested parallel has in its favor, however, since the narratives of these myths are completely different in literally every detail, and for good reason. It is Finn MacKinley who, while rescuing back the cow, Glasgavnin, mirrors the actual narrative details of Odin stealing back the mead, as discussed earlier. As soon as you zoom in on any of the details of the comparison between Balor and Ymir, it falls apart. Nor does Balor have any specific qualities in common with Ymir. Balor is one-eyed and lives in a tower, far more like Suttungr in his mountain fortress, and not like the primordial Ymir lying in the icy void. Balor has no primordial birth or role in creation, as does Ymir, and his body is emphatically not made into the world as Ymir's is. Again, Balor is Suttungr. Balor is not killed by three brothers as Ymir is, but by the one son of Finn MacKinley, that is Lu, and this happens at an extremely late point in the myths, said to be on Samhain, the very end of the yearly cycle and thus the end of the cosmic cycle. Ymir, meanwhile, is sky and earth in a unity. When Odin and his two brothers kill him, they divide him into sky and earth, effectively separating sky from union with earth. The head of Ymir remains as the sky. The separation of the earth goddess from her husband also is performed by three brothers in Gaelic myth, and this is the actual parallel of the death of Ymir. Just because this myth is not well known doesn't mean it isn't sitting right there in the myth of the triple Mother Earth, Eriu, Fodla, and Banva, the three brothers that killed the tripartite husband of this tripartite earth goddess, thereby separating Earth from her primordial union with sky, just happens to be Eivor Finn and his two brothers, Avrion and Eravon. Thus, Eivor Finn directly parallels Odin here in the actual parallel of Ymir's splitting, when the details of the myths are taken into account and understood. So while Lu does have a hunting dog, as Fortress of Lu points out, Fionn has two hunting dogs, ones who are much more prominent in his mythos and central to his identity, since he is a hunter, and one of whom is even named Bran, meaning raven. While Lu does have a famous and deadly spear, so also does Fionn, and it is the spear of Fiacha, meaning raven. As mentioned earlier, one of Fionn's hounds is named Raven, Bran, while Vidrir's, that is Odin's hounds, Geri and Freki, are greedy for the corpses of those who have fallen in battle, in Helga Kvidda Hundingsbana 1, verse 13. These dogs' behavior then being comparable to that of ravens, as Fionn's hound is named Raven. So we have a comparison of hounds who are named or act like ravens. The association with binding that Fortress of Lu tries to press is far too loose of a category, simply because more than one god is associated with binding, and this should be easy to understand. Thus, it leads us nowhere. For example, Varuna frequently binds the wicked with his noose and fetters, as is famous in the Vedic texts. But Mitra, aka Mithra, also is a god of binding. Indeed, the paired gods Mitra and Varuna share qualities. This is part of why they are a pair. They overlap but are different. Their shared role of sovereignty inherently involves binding society together by contract or binding criminals, liars, or oath-breakers in fetters. Thus, they both bind, not always in precisely the same capacity. The Greek hero who incarnates the Mitra-type god, Menelaus, as I've shown in my articles, binds a seer with a chain in one meaningful episode. Thus, the Mitra type is associated with a binding chain at some points. This act of binding obviously does not make Menelaus Odinic. Mitra has a special connection to binding and himself embodies that which binds, but in a particular way. The name Mitra even comes from a root, literally meaning to bind. Wiktionary says Mitra comes from Proto-Indo-Iranian mitras, literally that which causes binding, from Proto-Indo-European me, M-E-Y, meaning literally to bind. And we see in the Avestan hymn to Mitra, the Mihir Yasht, verse 48, for instance, quote, "And when Mithra drives along towards the havocing hosts, towards the enemies, coming in battle array, in the strife of the conflicting nations, then he binds the hands of those who have lied unto Mithra." Unquote. Now, Lu's very name has been proposed to come from H subscript 2 Lewgh, meaning to bind by oath, related to Old Irish Luige and Welsh LLW, both meaning oath, vow, act of swearing, and derived from a suffixed Proto-Celtic form, Lugio, Lugio, meaning oath, while the Vedic god of this archetype, Mitra, is believed to have originated as the god embodying the binding contract, founded on obligatory gift exchange, the oath being one species of contract. Scholar Gail Hiley explains that the two most common theories regarding the name Lugus are Leu, meaning light, and Old Irish Luige, from Lugion, Lugion, meaning oath. See Hiley Le Dieu Celtique Lugus, page 105. Scholar Garrett Olmsted expands upon the second of these thus, quote, "An alternative and possibly more likely etymology for Lugus, favored by Mead and Hamp, is to see an origin from the zero grade of the apophonic forms Leugh or Lough, Lugh, meaning oath or vow, from H subscript 2 Leugh, as suggested by Wagner in 1970. One should note, however, that this root is usually presented as an IO stem and only attested in Celtic, that is LUGIIO, see DPC 247, and also Germanic, see IEW 687. Only the full grade and the zero grade are attested. From this view, the deity name Lugus likely meant god of vows, giving Lugus a role as a god of contracts like Mitra and Mithro. Mead would see Lucus, Lucus, as simply an orthographic variation of Lugus, Lugus, unquote. This is from Olmsted, The Gods of the Celts and the Indo-Europeans, page 97. This means that Jan Puvel's claim in his 1987 book, Comparative Mythology, that Lugus means raven is not supported by the up-to-date scholarly consensus, and Puvel did not provide any argument or evidence for the theory at the time either. I have seen no other current scholars support this etymology for the name of the Gaelic god Lu, and using it to try to support a parallel to Odin is cherry-picking from the bottom of the barrel. Or at least it is very fringe and not commonly agreed upon. Irish already has two words for raven, fiacha and bran, both of which are closely connected with Fionn as mentioned. The victory-bringing role of Lu's spear is also too broad of a category, since victory is closely associated with the Mitra type, just as much as with the Odin type. From the Avestan hymn to Mithra, verses 35 to 36, Mithra is called, quote, victory-making, army-governing, endowed with 1,000 senses, power-wielding, power-possessing, and all-knowing, who sets the battle a-going, who stands against armies in battle, who standing against armies in battle breaks asunder the lines arrayed, unquote. Verse 26 says Mithra, quote, establisheth nations in supreme victory, unquote. And then in verse 67, Mithra is the one accompanied by victory and the wheel of sovereignty thus, quote, who drives along on his high-wheeled chariot, made of a heavenly substance, from the Kashvare of Ar-Ezahi to the Karshvare of Zvaniratha, the Bright One, accompanied by the wheel of sovereignty, the glory made by Mazda, and the victory made by Ahura, unquote. Even more exactly matching Lu of the long arm, Mithra is also extolled as long-armed in verses 104 through 105, quote, whose long arms, strong with Mithra strength, encompass what he seizes in the easternmost river and what he beats with the westernmost river, what is by the Sanaka of the Rangha, and what is by the boundary of the earth. And thou, O Mithra, encompassing all this around, do thou reach it all over with thy arms, unquote. To assume Lu's victoriousness then must connect him to Odin and the Odinic type. One would also have to forget that Tyr in Gylfaginning, chapter 25, is said to have, quote, much authority over victory in battle, unquote. And the fact that the Tyr rune is known as the victory rune and is the shape of a spear. It is Tyr and not Odin who is the Mitra type, as Dumasil established in his Mitra Varuna and Gods of the Ancient Northmen. See also my article and book chapter, The Case for Tyr equals Mitra. The spear-shaped rune of victory is thus a symbol of Tyr, while the Mitra-type incarnations Menelaus and Yudhishthira both wield spears that bring on final victory in the Great War. Neither spears nor victory connect solely to Odin or the Odinic type. Such things naturally connect to different sovereign gods in different ways. Thus they are too vague and have misled Fortress of Lu in this comparison. Meanwhile, again, Fionn wields the great spear of Fiacha, and is more associated with this spear than with his sword in the earliest Fionn traditions. His spear brings the victory no one else can attain against Allen, and against untold others. He is absolutely a spear god. In summary, beyond some general overlapping associations between Lu and Odin, which should quite literally be expected due to the close relationship of the Lu and Fionn god types, the Mitra Varuna and Rudra god types, it is only Finn who is the match of Odin in essentially every way. Just because Mitra or Mitra Varuna, aka Lu, reflects some qualities of Rudra, aka Finn, it doesn't make Mitra Varuna into Rudra. Of Finn can it be far more fully and precisely said, he is the Gaelic Odin. Let's end the confusion on this matter, a matter which is surprisingly clear-cut, if we know where to look. Check out my video on Fionn for more on his direct parallel with Rudra, and see also my article and book chapter on the same topic, as well as my videos on the Celtic creation myth, and my videos on Cernunnos, for even more related to the great god Finn. There is still more to say about Fionn and Rudra in the future, in particular the fact that the myth of Fionn killing Allen, the myth of Fionn and Gaul defeating the hag Irnon, the birth myth of Fionn Macul, and the story of Fintan leaping into the water to escape the enamored women, all parallel Rudra myths. If you appreciate the research I publish in my articles and videos, and want to see the larger project reach its culmination, such as the completion of my second book, Briochan's Tower, and the continued release of new videos on all the important topics I have in mind, you can join my Patreon with the link below and add fuel to the fire. My book, Taliesin's Map, the Comparative Guide to Celtic Mythology, is available from Amazon. Link in the description. Make sure to like and subscribe for more as we map the myths.